To me, martial arts is more than just a physical education. It's also a civic education. And I don't mean in the traditional civic education of like, these are the 3 pillars of government. We have the executive. No. What I mean is it's about how we interact with each other as humans.
Woo, welcome. You have now entered Mad Warfare, mutually assured distraction, where we explore the weird, terrifying, and sometimes hilarious ways war is fought today, and how we can all protect our minds before we go too mad to find them.
Oh my!
Dangerous pattern. Dangerous pattern. Dangerous pattern.
How can you talk if you haven't got a brain?
Dangerous pattern. Dangerous pattern. Dangerous pattern.
Reminder, the opinions on this show are ours alone, and honestly, we might regret some of them later. They don't reflect our employers, past, present, or imaginary. This is a playground of wild ideas, so please, don't take anything here too seriously, unless it's genius. Then it was definitely intentional. Hello, everybody. I'm Jocelyn, co-host.
I'm Sean Guillory, the other co-host.
Joining us today is somebody who spent his life studying conflict from the mat to the battlefield. He's a lifelong martial artist, special operations veteran, and now the founder of Randori Resources, where he helps people train their minds the way fighters train their bodies. Please welcome Sam Carus.
Really happy to be here, to talk about passion of mine, martial arts, and the interesting intersection that we have here with cognitive warfare, martial arts, and how we can prepare and defend ourselves mentally, not just physically.
Can you give our audience like broad strokes of your career? What's your journey? What brought you here?
It's been a long one and it's been a winding one, so it's back and forth. But I started martial arts when I was 3 or 4, before I can really remember. Like some of my strongest, earliest memories. Oh yeah, there was this one particular event that I think like sent the trajectory in a particular way, and it kind of marries everything in my career together. When I was 14, I went I had this opportunity to do a sailing trip with my family. My family has this like really interesting tradition of a coming of age. So it's like the summer before high school begins, the parents take the child out and does like something that will expose them to something different than what they've seen previously. Kind of a little bit of hardship, compared to like, a soft American upbringing in the suburbs, if you will. So it was a sailing trip from Hawaii, Oahu specifically, down to Fanning Island in the Republic of Cuba, which is in the middle of the Pacific. Along the way, we stopped at Palmyra, which is a former U.S. naval base that is deep and in the process of being reclaimed by the forest, but there's a lot of unexploded ordnance.
Wait. So you're a 14-year-old, you go sailing in the middle of nowhere, which I grew up in Hawaii, so it's literally the middle of nowhere. It's the most isolated landmass on the planet. To go to a place where there might be unexploded, things might explode.
I mean, we were bringing like scientists, I think. I believe we were bringing
the young man in the
from
sea.
Oahu to Palmyra to help them. And there's like other scientists that they were there. And then while we were down there, we were like, well, why don't we just like get out of the country and go another couple, a week down south and go to Fanning Island. So the story is on the way back from the island, from Fanning Island, we had like really, really heavy wind. I don't know what the actual knottage was or anything like that, but it was really heavy. And in order to make good time and not like sink us, we were basically tacking really hard, which means we were like sailing diagonally with the wind. And our boat, This is the boat, would be floating like flat. We were diagonal. And then this part of the boat was submerged underwater. And we're just like cruising along at like 30, 35 knots, which is really, really fast for a 40-foot cutter. So as a 14-year-old boy, I was told by the captain, who was my great uncle, that I was expected to be a full member of the crew, be treated as an adult. So I was doing full watches. And once I had proved myself, it was like, okay, you're on your own. So night watches, day watches. So we were in this middle of the storm and I'm holding onto the wheel and we're flying, but we're coming up these really big waves and then crashing down really, really hard. And while I was on watch, I was like zoned in. I was like in the moment and I was surfing the whole boat in order to stay balanced because I couldn't see over the front of the boat unless I stood in the cockpit because I'm a short little 14-year-old. And my father came out to check on me, say, you know, to see if I needed some food or whatever. And I got distracted, came up, slammed down, and I flew out of the cockpit.
Oh no!
And I slammed into like the stanchion, which is like a pole with like a bunch of ropes on it, and probably fractured a rib or broke something, and then grabbed on and I climbed back up into the cockpit. And my father was in the cockpit, was like reaching down to get me. If I'd gone overboard, I was gone.
Wow.
What it really was a mental slip. I needed to pay attention and be on focus to surf these waves on this boat.
Mhm.
And when I didn't keep that focus, I almost died.
Did this moment, was that part of a catalyst or catapult for you wanting to pursue a career in, you know, when I hear the word PSYOPs as one of your background, one of the many journeys you've had is in PSYOPs, psychological operations, which sounds like spy thriller show, right? For people who don't know, it's just like a Hollywood, you're doing spy versus spy, it's crazy, and it sounds like a big adventure where you're facing a lot of stakes, high risk situations. Did this moment play into that at all?
I think so. I mean, I think in a lot of ways what this moment ended up having for me is making me like really value life in the sense of like, hey, I'm going to live to the fullest and to the extremist. And that was not necessarily the healthiest, if you understand what I'm saying. So I was engaging in a lot of risky behavior and in a lot of like living the moment without a lot of like foreplanning and a lot of forethought. Also doesn't help that I had undiagnosed ADHD too. So yeah, that'll not help.
What is a career in PSYOPs like?
It's a fun one, I'll tell you that much. So there's two different really components in PSYOP. There's like a reserve component and an active duty component. The active duty component is the component that is part of Special Operations Forces. And so I can't really speak for the reserve component because I never did anything with the reserve component other than some, you know, training that they would come down to Fort Bragg. Yeah, Fort Bragg still. Mm-hmm. So basically on the active duty side, there's just a wide variety of missions that you could be doing. Like you could be assisting with a special forces team in Syria, say, and you would be maybe carrying a giant loudspeaker. And you'd be saying, hey, like you need to surrender, you know, a tactical call out. I mean, I'm making it sound kind of ridiculous because it can be, because, you know, are you going to get someone who's to surrender? It's very difficult, but, you know, we have to follow the law of war. At least we try to. So there is that. The other side is like you could be in a suit and tie and working very closely hand in hand with the ambassador and helping out, you know, an NGO and helping deliver medical supplies. It could be as simple as that. And you're just slapping on US flags on there. It could be as simple as that. Or it could be, hey, we need to come up with a strategic narrative for this whole like operational theater. And then go into the weeds of all the different things that we're drawing and trying to do. So it can get very, very complicated, but it can also be very, very simple, depending upon your perspective.
And the strategic narrative would be, the objective might be try to convince somebody of a new belief, or what would that look like?
I think more of it as like you are trying to further whatever U.S. government goals and objectives are abroad. And so that could be very simply like, hey, we want them to be more friendly in this area so that we can have our corporate interests come in and mine, right? It could be as simple as that.
One thing I kind of wanted to see if you would agree with this statement or not, because I've been saying it enough. And again, if I've been wrong, then I need to apologize to a lot of folks. But in terms of things I've seen around psychological operations, it's a lot like marketing. If psychological operations is like military grade marketing, then the stuff that we're putting out there in terms of industry is, I don't know, like weapons of mass destruction kind of levels of like whatever that kind of messaging and influence is out there. So, yeah.
Yes, agreed with that. And that is kind of the point that I'm trying to make here, is that there's a misconception that like military PSYOP has this ability to do these insanely complicated and crazy things. And to some extent, things can look that way when things coincidentally align. But and maybe that might have been the objective, is to make things align and make it a conspiracy. But like, it might help to give some context about some historical psyops that were successful or not, potentially, that are not obviously no longer classified or anything like that. For example, like BLM movement. I'm not going to get into the politics of BLM and the movement itself, but I'll just talk about the Russian active measures effort that happened coincidingly along with the movement. So they had a headquarters in New York City, I believe. Russian agents rented out a office space like right next door, and then spoofed on the IP, and then released memes of the similar content to what BLM was doing, but just a little bit more extremist on one end and the other.
Oh, wow.
Which thus
so it's
only
increased divisiveness, or
yes,
Correct.
Yes. One of the very, very classic ones was about HIV, and was actually your Russian embassy.
This is very much documented, by the way. It's a bread and butter in terms of at least Russian kind of operation. They targeted the African American community with messages that U.S. scientists created AIDS in a laboratory to get out there, and specifically wanted to go after the African American community. How Russia kind of did that, and Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, or audience out there, reach out if I'm wrong, this kind of characterization. I thought they planted it in a lot of India-based newspapers. And then from there, Western outlets kind of picked up that story until it became
like urban legend.
You say urban, yes, it's still something that people like. Kanye West has a song where he kind of talks about it again, like older Kanye.
Not batshit Kanye.
I won't go with that timeline necessarily, but it's still something that I think is still believed by a portion of African American. So again, if you're talking about success and longevity of these sort of things, again, that's certainly a mission accomplished.
And to what end is this? I suppose there's all kinds of examples or all kinds of objectives, but this one sounds to me, how do we increase mistrust in government or in science?
So it depends. It depends on how you frame it, right? Because like the actual operation itself could have just been like, "Hey, we just want to spread this rumor," and then if it was successful, which it was, then it grows, and it's like, okay, how do we amplify this message? And then it kind of grows, right? So it might not all the end results are 100% intentional in that sense of our end goal is this, and we're going to achieve this by this whole. Because like active measures is a lot of times characterized by like, we're going to throw a lot of things out, and we'll find the things that are sticky and divisive, and then go from there.
Why would they do that? Why? What's the point?
The point is purely to break apart as whatever piece you can possibly break apart in the overall structure of the United States. So it doesn't matter what you're weakening necessarily, as long as you chop away here, eventually some little rotten piece or some important piece will go and something will fall.
If your plan is to take down America or just any of the country, again, you could shoot a missile. It could aim exactly where you're going to want it to. Folks are going to know exactly where it came from. You can't hide that. In terms of like where it came from, they're going to hold whoever, again, put that out there responsible. And a lot of the different ways, if we're talking about in the information space and how people can respond to that, like this again, like the next person who will set off a nuclear bomb, whoever it is, whatever reason, that group or nation will be persona non grata in the international community probably for the next 100 years. You are going to lose doing things like that. Versus if you still want to go after his nation, you got to make it where plausible deniability, how you do that, and it may not be something where you can physically attack. It's actually really getting very well into the martial arts in terms of the subject matter. So how do you do that? As in terms of like, how do you attack and go after this nation? At least from like the Soviet and the Russian standpoint, which again, Sam already said the secret word in terms of, active measures. This is how you go and try to destroy a nation. You will do it through messaging and words and getting different groups to fight one another. If you find this very angry, smaller portion of the population, but maybe actually it may be a lot more people, but they just may not be in power. That's going to have the folks on top very scared, probably do stuff that's going to look bad. And in some countries, in some world, you can start a revolution that way. And that's kind of putting that messaging in when you didn't have to fire a single shot and you're going to get everything you want in terms of like certain leader out of power or
just say, well, here's a story. It seems plausible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's clever because if you already have some suspicion, then it's like, great. Now we just put in 100 or 1,000 more stories related to that.
Exactly.
And
that's the problem with an open information environment, which is what we have in America, right? Whereas if we contrast that with China, they have their intranet and the Great Wall, firewall, if you will, of China, right? And then they monitor every single thing that is going on inside the country. And obviously we know like people disappear, very powerful people disappear for links on time and come back and apologize and all this. So we know like that's how they're keeping one lid on it. But in America, where we don't have a lid on it, we can't shut down these misinformation bots or whatever. I mean, literally the FBI report about those spoofed toll road.
I haven't heard that, but I know.
So there's spoofed toll roads that are being like sent to text messages saying like you owe the Ohio State Freeway X number of dollars.
Okay, got it.
So this is a Chinese run operation. The FBI made a statement about it, and it was in the New York Times a couple days ago or a week ago or whatever. And they're able to shut down like 40,000 websites like a day or something like that. The U.S. government is. These guys are making 90,000. So like they can't. And this is just a private Chinese ring, right? Like this is not necessarily like a government entity even. So my point is that we can't keep up with that. So how do we protect ourselves from in an information environment that is like completely open and just like, hey, it's all coming at you?
What are some things within your work in martial arts do you think people can probably gleam in on or can like learn that can help them in terms of seeing these different elements that are going on, the kind of things that we're talking about, being ready for it, because some of these things are jarring and tragic. I just wanted to hear how you think martial arts and thinking about that has helped you in terms of that kind of navigation in cognitive space and even cognitive warfare.
If I go back to that story where I nearly died on that boat, right?
Yeah.
How did I, as a 14-year-old kid who's never sailed like ever in his life, have the wherewithal to like catch himself, climb back up into the boat and like try and like take back the wheel? Where does that come from? In my opinion, it was because this was my first major exposure to that level of adrenaline where, your heart is pounding, you have tunnel vision, time slows down like crazy, and you are incredibly strong, stronger than you think and realize, right? Mm-hmm. So for example, when I flew over and hit the stanchion, grabbed myself, climbed back up, that probably took like a split second. But my father was just reacting and reaching forward towards me by the time I had already climbed back in there. That only happens because of the adrenaline. And the only reason that the adrenaline didn't overwhelm me and I was able to function properly is because I had been doing martial arts my entire life. But I don't think you need to do it your entire life to get the benefit of it, because the majority of what you do when you're a kid is just learning how to move properly. Like once you hit about like 7, 8, that's when things start being able to click in terms of like technical stuff, in terms of like, hey, I can compete a little bit. It's not very serious. It's not very like hard or anything like that. But it's like that stress of that competition or that stress of those promotion or belt testings or whatever they are, they help you manage your stress in the future in terms of prepare you for stressful events. But in terms of listeners, in terms of what they should try and take away from this is you need to pay attention to your body. And I know that sounds weird, but like when we even hear something, if I say something to you that is offensive to you, you're going to have an immediate reaction, right? Well, we need to know what those reactions are and how we react to things, because otherwise we're just reacting constantly without any conscious thought.
And that's being controlled.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
And specifically when we're talking about stress, which is a favorite area of mine because I have high stress professional formerly, and I'm a
To say the
young
least.
parent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm a young parent now too.
To
So,
say this
you know.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
Which one is
Yeah,
more
so-
stressful?
They're stressful for different reasons. I think being in special operations was easier than being a parent.
Very good.
So like with stress, we have the adrenaline hit our brain. Our brain naturally shunts the blood away from our prefrontal cortex. Now, this is for a reason. This is to make sure our decision making is happening faster and more reactionary and following more along training basis, because it's being handled by the medial prefrontal cortex instead of the full prefrontal cortex, which is more involved with strategic decision making and things like that.
I'm going to be like the Vanna White of neuroscience. After again, medial will be kind of like inside here. Again, if we not spreading the corpus callosum versus
There we go. There's the
full
brain right
control,
there.
Be like right here. So yeah, like so.
Not
see it
here.
right there. So, exactly.
Yeah. So the executive decision making of your brain gets turned off with stress. Now, obviously, varying degrees of stress have varying degrees of responses and all this sort of thing. But if we are reading, say, sensationalism journalism, like so-and-so just murdered their whatever, right? Like immediately reactive, immediately we are stressed. Immediately we are not thinking as clearly as maybe we should be when we're interacting with just like the reading. Like the last thing you want to do is read a newspaper article about some political thing and then have that tension or anger from that article carry into like your interactions with your child, for example, like my child. Like I don't want to do that ever, right? Like, why is daddy angry all the time? He's angry at the world because he's upset about something. What?
And not even being aware of it.
Right, exactly. And so really trying to pay attention to ourselves, you need to know and really realize what it is. Like, and it is a continual process, but it's a continual process. It's not like, oh, I know how I react to this, because we change, we evolve, our brains change. We hopefully continue to grow and learn over time, hopefully.
In different contexts, well,
yes,
we're
exactly.
going through
So,
different
like,
things at different times.
So sometimes just being able to take that little moment, and I like to go into state management when I'm talking about this sort of thing too, where you try and de-stress yourself when you realize you're stressed. But it starts with awareness
of your state. Yeah, your mental state. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Important to call out that we have to protect your mind. You need to understand your body. Like we have this notion, particularly in the West, that these things are somehow separate, which is insane. I think you even put it really poignantly somewhere in the notes when we were talking. It's like you can't. You don't have a body without a mind, and vice versa.
Yeah.
You can't control.
Yeah.
This is an organism that works together.
Correct.
If the vessel that houses our brain is unhealthy, then how can the brain and mind be functioning perfectly well? It doesn't make sense. And I mean, if I have all sorts of heart issues for whatever reason, that is definitely going to affect my brain, because now the blood flow is affecting my brain because it's not the healthiest blood flow, and I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going deep in here into the science of it, but it seems to make very intuitive sense of like, hey, if you have a healthier body, your mind can function better too.
And I think, all right, just that classic know thyself in terms of Socrates and Plato, I think a lot of folks, when they hear that phrase, they are just thinking about in terms of like the mental capacity. And that is important, absolutely, in terms of understanding, again, like your mind space. And one thing I used to say, again, because I was a philosophy undergraduate, I was like, I don't trust a philosopher that doesn't know wrestling. And that kind of goes into, I'm not going to trust a philosopher that doesn't do any kind of like martial arts. Because again, that kind of knowing your body plus your mind, I think is absolutely important. I actually do think that, again, like the ancient Greeks, who very much placed importance in, like professional wrestling and this kind of body maintenance plus the mind, I'd imagine they were talking about both.
That same quote of know thyself also applies to like Sun Tzu's Art of War as well.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's the same. It's pretty much the same thing, right? It's just like
the ultimate defense,
right? Like you need to assess and know yourself, and that means all the different areas. That doesn't mean singular aspect, right?
You're saying the first step is really just awareness, right?
So once you're aware, then the battle, it really begins, in my opinion, because once you're aware, now you have to fight how you're going to deal with that. Are you going to use it? Because there's a reason you might use a negative emotion. For example, maybe I'm really ashamed about something that I did in the past, and I'm going to use that shame to fuel myself to be a better person and never do that thing again. Now, it's not necessarily the most healthy thing. I'm not talking about in a purely therapeutic context here. I'm just talking about using emotions as fuel. So that might be a thing that people do, but that's not the battle. That's just like burning it, right? In my opinion, the battle is once you recognize it and then you say, hey, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be agitated or anxious or whatever. Then you have to find the time and the wherewithal to be like, can I take this moment to try and state shift from this stress state down into a more relaxed state? And for us in the military, who were trained to sleep anywhere at any time, partially because of sleep deprivation, but also a trained thing where you can literally fall into physical relaxation, but still have mental acuity.
Okay.
Like a cat.
Which is also a precursor to lucid dreaming as well. But that's a side note.
Sam, I just got to ask you, though, why do you think martial arts is like an important lens to look through?
So to me, martial arts is more than just fighting. Yes, it like hones our bodies and yes, it hones our minds for physical action and prepares it for stress. And there's a path for continual growth as well that can be physically shown to a child growing up, which is very important because it kind of outlines a path for continual progress for their potential entire life. But to me, martial arts is more than just the physical education. It's also a civic education. And I don't mean in the traditional civic education of like, these are the 3 pillars of government. We have the executive. No, what I mean is it's about how we interact with each other as humans. So in a martial arts room, when we're trying to get better for whatever reason, whether it's because I'm trying to be a better version of myself, or if it's because, I'm trying to compete and win the Olympics, for whatever reason, we're all trying to get better, but I'm competing individually. So does a room look like we're all just trying to murder each other? It might to an untrained eye. But a room is actually one of the most interesting places of this dichotomy between, yes, there's like combat sport, martial art applications happening, but it's also this growing environment where I'm going to accept being thrown here because if I don't, I might hurt myself, but then also my partner doesn't get his good opportunity. So there's like aspects of mutual benefit and reciprocity. There's also the other philosophical things you can learn as well, like maximum efficiency, minimal effort, although that can get bastardized if you're not too careful. Other philosophical lessons that can be learned and gleaned, and more than just, I heard it and I know it, right? They're experienced, which gives a deeper level of knowledge, in my opinion, than just academically learning something.
And again, the beautiful thing I just love, this sounds like something where it'll have folks not only thinking about national security closer to top of mind, but it will have them seeing, me as an individual, my community and my nation, how can I as an individual contribute to our greater national security? And some of it is, like I said, just those kind of smaller interpersonal skills that I think a lot of folks don't see necessarily as important. Maybe they'll see it as badass in terms of martial arts, but it's extremely important. It's lessons that are taught within martial arts. So that's why I think it's a beautiful thing.
And to add on to that with the notion of security and the framing, right? I think a lot of people might think of walls and, like actual defense, but we're also talking about feeling secure and strong in your body and feeling secure in your community and feeling, you have trust in yourself and others. And what I'm hearing too is so I'm such a big advocate of play, and martial arts is a playground. You're playing, you're pushing limits. Like when we see puppies wrestle, they're testing limits and they see when to back off and when, somebody's actually hurt, and they're building empathy along with hunting and killing skills at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what difference would it make if our country started treating martial arts as part of curriculum for all kids. What would that look like? How would it change us?
この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りいたしました。
Is your brain out of shape? Getting bullied by your own inbox? You work out, but your brain does interpretive dance in a panic room? Introducing Randori Resources, the mental dojo for high-stress humans who are one email away from snapping. Whether you're a CEO, cage fighter, or just trying not to scream in a Trader Joe's parking lot, we got you. Sharper focus, better sleep, fewer existential spirals over calendar invites. This isn't yoga with a scented candle. It's science you can actually use. If your nervous system throws punches, you better learn to counter. Mental reps, tactical calm, fewer breakdowns in the break room. Call us? No thanks. Just click the link like a normal person. Randori-resources.com.
Right body, right mind,
right action.
Come down today for your free trial lesson.
So, in my opinion, there's already some strong historical precedent for this. We've seen it happen historically in Japan and in Russia, and to some degree as well in France. France has judo as part of their public education program. France's Judo Federation has like 690,000 people in it. And to give you some perspective, USA Wrestling has like 370 or 390. I'm totally butchering those numbers, but it is, France has a lot more doing judo, which is wild. So in terms of what this would look like in America and how this could affect us, I think what we're looking at in terms of implementation is going to end up having to be a martial art that is grappling focused, because we have to minimize concussions when we're talking about kids. And we have to maximize movement and movement control and a culture of movement. And you don't want to have kids getting hurt or hurting each other, because that just reinforces bullying culture instead of nipping it at the bud in order to have this mutual respect and in order to create the growth environments for our children. So one, there's got to be the coaching and like the level of detail that needs to go in has to be very high, and there's going to have to be all sorts of certifications probably and regulations, because we're talking about schools. And that's for a good reason. When I talk about this and think about this, I just think about judo, because Jigoro Kano is the founder of judo, and he's also one of the founders of Japan's modern academic system in general. And he's also the one who got judo into the Olympics in the beginning. And he was not a athlete. He was probably me if I had chosen to stay in neuroscience. So a lot less muscle, but about the same height, probably about a little bit, 20 pounds lighter. He's like 115 pounds, 5'5", 5'4", very small man. And yet he founded the Kodokan and had these crazy judo monsters underneath him. Well, his thing was, it was a philosophy. It is to train your body, to sharpen your mind so that you can be a better citizen. Mm-hmm. That's the whole purpose. So when I look at, and when you ask me, like, what does physical or what does martial arts education look like in schools? Being an American, I say, why do I have to rewrite the wheel when somebody already created something that's really good and really effective? Mm-hmm. And by the way, had the side effect of making Japanese warriors extremely effective in hand-to-hand combat. So much so that after Russia's skirmishes with them in the early 20th century, they decided to adopt judo but then they changed it into sambo to nationalize it, to make it more popular. So there's already a very strong precedent for this, which is, hey, it can make our people better, not only just better fighters, but also better mentally, because now we're physically engaged and we're learning physically along with learning mentally. Because a lot of times what happens after college, if you were lucky to do sports in college, after college, maybe you play pickup once in a while, but like you're growing mentally in all these different work directions, family, emotionally, whatever. But are you physically still growing?
Yeah.
Or are you stagnating in this area, in that aspect?
This country is again, like
true. And
I mean, it is a challenge. The time is a challenge. Like, it is all a challenge. And that's part of the problem, is figuring out, how do you integrate this? We don't have a culture of movement. We grew up in a school system that was constantly cutting physical education.
You go and sit. And you just sit and listen, and you're a child. That's insane. That's your whole day.
going to the national security aspect, I was in a meeting at USIS Human Performance Laboratory, which is the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences.
Mm-hmm.
Former Secretary of Health or Secretary General Shoemaker was in this meeting, and he said his number one security concern was obesity. And this was back in 2012. And he said that it's like 69% or something like that of kids could not be eligible for the military because of obesity. Well, since that time, it's been 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
Has it gotten any better? No, the answer is no,
so.
right? No, it's gotten worse. The obesity rate is worse, and more worse is it's starting younger. So now, like my wife used to work in the peds here in North Carolina for weight men, and she was seeing 7-year-olds who were obese.
Yeah, obesity is a national security aspect. Yeah, that's
I mean, it's beyond just like, hey, we need bodies to throw into the meat grinder. Like beyond that aspect, right? Like just in terms of there's a lot of things to talk about national security. One, the healthcare cost burden.
Correct.
Right? Because we don't have a physical culture. We don't have physical culture as part of our thing. Like we don't do sports as like this thing. We watch it, we'll eat.
Mm-hmm. We treat it as a elite thing. Only the football player, the 12 people who become quarterbacks, whatever it is. Right.
That's a good way to put it too, Jocelyn. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is if we have martial arts and education, there's less bullying, there's more resiliency, there's more awareness of self and others, and we can help. I think the obesity issue is there's a lot going on there, but you would have a culture that at least prioritizes awareness of what you're putting into how you're fueling yourself. And I think that would have ripple effects too, right? On the food system. And
the last
I'm thinking about a school system, frankly, that it's very different from what we're looking at right now. Like right now we're looking at, okay, how many people did you graduate? How many people matriculated to college? How many people failed? And that's kind of like these are these broad metrics. And so I was talking with a very good friend of mine who's a professor of education up in Minnesota. One of the things he said is like, well, I can solve these like problems really easily by just failing a bunch of the elite kids. And now all of a sudden we don't have an achievement gap.
Oh, wow.
That's the
it's
problem.
A solution.
No, exactly. It's a solution, but it's not really the solution, right? Yeah, like let's just fail a bunch of these elite kids, and then bam, we've solved this, right? And it's like, okay. I mean, I see what he's saying, which is the point is that there's damn lies, and statistics. But what I think he was really trying to get at here is that the system isn't structured properly from the get-go. And so I think like the defunding of the Department of Education is going to have tragic effects and is already having tragic effects, I'm sure. But in some ways, I don't know how you can start over and create something better without getting rid of it in the first place. So my hope or thought would be that like, hey, with this, we can reevaluate the priorities of the Department of Education because it says we're supposed to be competitive with the world market, but we import our unskilled labor and we import our skilled labor. So to me, that just means we're like creating profoundly mediocre people. Like, and I'm including myself in this, like, I just don't see how a education system that we keep like being like, okay, you need to check this box. You need to achieve this. You need to achieve this. None of this is preparing our children for being successful in life. And what does that mean? Health. Well, how do you be healthy? You learn how to eat properly and you learn how to move properly for life. Okay. What else do we need to learn? Yeah. Handle your stress. Yeah. But then also communication skills, right? Like not just like we're not just talking about martial arts here. We're talking about a revamp of the entire thing, which has a focus on life and setting our children up for success versus let's specialize them so early. It's like we tried to do a Chinese model, but without any of the actual authoritarianism necessary.
Sam, where do you think we could start? So we talked about, the value of this for everybody in the education system, just for all citizens. And there sounds like there might be an opportunity with what's going on with the Department of Education, where can we start?
I think first we need to start by making sure that whatever thing that we want to put in for an American martial arts education system, or that's a partial physical and civic education system, is aligned with what we are trying to teach our kids. And I mean that in like terms of like the simplest things. I saw it the other day. For example, my daughter, I'm working on not hitting right now because she watched some Bruce Lee movies with me, and now she's going high on hitting. And therefore, she thinks it's super cute. It's super cute.
Yeah.
But the last thing I want her to do is now think that's cool for her to do with her friends who aren't cool with this level of physical play. Like my daughter and I will be like, let's fight, and we'll just play wrestle, right? No harm, no foul. We're just playing. But she can't run up to another kid and be like, let's fight, and think it's going to go the same way. Right? It's not the same. And so it's very important that if I teach my daughter how to strike, it's like she needs to know when is appropriate or not, right? A 4-year-old is not capable of that yet. And nor is a 4-year-old really capable of taking technical instruction. So when we're talking about this thing, what we're talking about from like basically through grade school is just a physical education primer. Yes, you can have the discipline, you can have the stance work, you have the fake punching and all the kata work. You can do all that. That's fine. But they need to play. They need to just figure out how their bodies move. They need for it to be fun so that they will continue to do it. And if we get bogged down in the weeds of like, oh, you're just not getting it right, but you're 6. But you need to get it because like this is what we're doing today. It's a very adult-centric way of teaching to a child. And so I think it's just very important that if we're talking about this, is like we're really probably only talking about martial arts in like the combative aspects of it in middle school and high school. And then in terms of like the elementary school, which is where you're going to see the biggest benefits, is going to be more on the testing. You're going to have your belt testing and all the families come and watch. That's stressful for a kid. That pressure is stressful. And now they got to go out and perform. And regardless, that's also an opportunity for the family to step up and show how awesome and supportive they are for their kid. And it involves it in the community, which is the school community, and not just whatever martial arts dojo that you're paying for with your other friends who are paying the same thing, which sort of creates this level of elitism potentially.
So this is one, how do we get this into the education system as a big thing to tackle, which I want to see happen too. But for everyday people, tomorrow or after they listen to this, what's one practical thing that they can do for themselves at borrowing from martial arts and how to respond, be resilient, deal with the world?
So there's, a lot of different methods and techniques to deal with the world because there's all sorts of different scenarios. But I will say that one of the most studied and research-backed beyond all belief is visualization. I mean, it's literally as simple as that, because with visualization, I mean, they've proven now that with visualization and meditation that you can reduce pain in cancer patients and in chronic pain and arthritis and all these other things. And this was done in conjunction with Buddhist meditation, techniques or whatever. But fundamentally, it's the same thing. Meditation, mindfulness meditation, if you will, visualization. But what I'm talking about here is a little bit different in the sense of with visualization, you can manipulate it beyond just like, oh, I'm going to relax. Or you can also use it to prepare for things. So you can use it to prepare for a terrible event. I mean, you don't want to necessarily, but we all have those.
Earn that awareness that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it helps you also react better because now you've visualized it, which means you've trained your brain a little bit to act following that pattern. And that even just those mental repetitions can make a big difference in physical outcomes. And I've seen that happen with some of my clients who do martial arts. Like I have one of my clients, I'll call him W. He had to take 2 weeks off for family stuff. He was gone in California doing family stuff. He came back and he was better, despite not having physically done anything active for 2 weeks. And why was he better? he was better because he just had spent the whole time visualizing. All his free moments was like, oh, I wonder if this move will work. And lo and behold, it came out physically. And he was like, where did that come from? He was surprised at himself. Also, visualization has also been studied by NASA as part of the NASA Behavior Competency Exam, and test basically. And one of the things that visualization was proven to do, I think it had a 69% increase first time success rate when trying something, and it also had a 39% increased retention rate.
And when we're talking about visualization too, like to bring it to a particular scenario. So if I'm about to head into, let's say I have a difficult conversation with a client or boss or, a work relationship or any kind of relationship, if I perhaps use that as I'm going to visualize the most ideal outcome just to help me figure out how to maintain composure and maybe get the best benefits for all parties involved. Would that be a way to use it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way. And then, on the more extreme end, it could be like, I'm going to visualize if I need to get to an exit and where that exit will be relative to where I'm standing.
Ideal plus it could go terribly wrong situations.
Yeah, that's the benefit of scenario training or mental scenario training is you can play with all the different variables and how it wants to go. I'm sure we all do it, right? We have those conversations that I wish I had said this to this guy in the shower. You're thinking about it. That was a good comeback. I should have said that. Well, it's the same thing, except instead of doing it about the past, we're doing it about the future.
And instead of catastrophizing, instead of here's how everything can go wrong, it's like, how do we, think about, shift it over to how can everything go right?
Yeah, and positive visualization is definitely extremely powerful. I use it in some of the stuff that I do with my clients, especially for competition preparation and, board meeting preparation. One of my clients, she was nervous because she was going to go ask for a promotion. And she was like, how do I do this? I was like, I barely know what industry you work in. You're doing like physical chemistry for Los Alamos. I don't know what you do. So why don't you play it out? You know the people that you're talking to. So she scenario trained it, and she said she didn't get what she wanted, but she got something.
Yeah.
And more importantly, she didn't stress out and freak out about it because she was like game planning. She's being productive with her mental energy.
I think that's important to point out too. So if this isn't woo-woo, manifest everything, bling, you get it just because you imagined it. And that's also part of how you learn the resiliency too, right? So you're trying to visualize the scenario that would be most ideal, and then you have to put in the effort and see what happens, and then deal with the outcome regardless of what it is. And it doesn't take away from the power of that. It's just it's a skill to practice over and over and over.
The way I see it is it helps us make the optimal choice, right? Because we're all faced with choices constantly. And so if we can be in a good state, we can find the right choice for that moment for whatever it is that we're trying to do.
So I'm going to visualize that this episode goes viral and everyone's going to start
put our brains together.
Yeah, physical education, martial arts for kids. It's going to take off.
We've just scratched the surface of the surface that needs to be scratched. So there's a lot more that we need to talk about on the subject. I do hope to have you on future episodes. With our time coming to an end, what are some things that you want to promote, or like how can folks find you?
You can find me at Randori Resources, but you can reach me through my email, which you guys can post in the show notes. But then I just want to give a shout out to one of Wes's projects. Wes is one of my former colleagues from Psychological Operations. He is currently running a grassroots community project. Cogent Gray is the name of it, to basically create non-manipulative communities and inoculate people and communities against mis and disinformation and influence, which is really exciting because it's about creating communities where you can like not get mad at each other over things. Weird.
Whoa, weird. Yeah.
Treat each other like people. Weird.
Thank you so much for being here and doing this. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Again, my pleasure.
I've come to talk with you again. Come and be inside my head. Cancel me, cancel me. I got things to say, you can cancel me. Cancel me, cancel to say. You cancel me. Cancel me. Cancel me. I got things to say. You cancel me. Cancel me. Cancel me. I got things to say. You cancel me.